economy is good. You know, people have jobs. They're not worried about someone who's here illegally taking their job, potentially. In fact, a lot of people will say the people who came over illegally are doing jobs that nobody here wants to do. I've heard that, at least.
And heard it recently.
And when the economy is bad, you know, people are not in good moods, and they are worried.
Finger.
Right.
Yeah, they want to point the finger.
We try not to think about how much of that is tied to things politically, too, but certainly with the economy, that's absolutely a hot potato. When we talk about people who are illegal and thinking of coming to the country just for a visit, there's also waves they talk about, waves of pregnant women coming in. Is there some reason that we should suddenly start thinking of watching who's coming in?
Oh, well, definitely. I mean, that's why you're enforcing the borders, and going back to what David said with Arizona, what they did in Arizona.
If people are coming in illegally, they
violated the law.
The government needs to figure out how to stop that from happening. If someone's pregnant and they want to come visit somebody, I don't think that that should be the determination as to whether or not they're granted a visa to come visit. You know, if my wife and I went to England and she was pregnant and she had a baby there, I would still think that the law allows me to bring my child back to the United States and raise my child as an American citizen. If an English person or some other person from another country came here and the wife was pregnant, I would assume they have a visitor's visa. They're going to take their child back to wherever they're from and raise their child as a citizen of that country.
That's all very legal, and that seems very legitimate. What happens with the green card now? Many are here with green cards, and I understand that in order to turn that green card into allowing you to become a full-fledged citizen, you need to be here 5 years, working, needing a sponsor. Are all of those things changing now, or are those things pretty much set from years and
that is the current status of the law, that there's a process.
Yeah.
And
it's a very technical process.
Yeah.
So there's a procedure you have to follow, and if you don't follow it appropriately, if your immigrant has had a green card that ran out and they apply after a period of time, then I think
they have to keep it current. You have to renew it. The sponsor has to be someone who's making more money than the poverty level to show that they could support the person that they're sponsoring, if that's an issue. And as Jackie was talking about at the beginning with the anchor babies, the 21-year-old who's sponsoring his parents has to be gainfully employed.
Yeah.
Yes, I think as the statute is, it's 5 years that you have the green card, and then you can, if you're working, gainfully employed, you can apply to be naturalized.
Yeah.
I think that if you're still in a situation where you're having sponsors and there's that in place, there's less of an issue about people worrying whether or not you're bringing in your whole entire tribe from some other country right now. And I understand that they must be trying to crack down on immigration laws, but it's a very deep concern to think that now with the rise of the number of illegal immigrants, suddenly we're going to have to check every child that comes in, every pregnant woman that comes in, but it certainly seems like that's what's happening.
Well, it's also an issue where immigrants come here and get married to U.S. citizens and assume that they're automatically United States citizens. So we, especially as municipal court judges, we're told we have to be extremely vigilant when we marry people.
Right.
If we perform a marriage ceremony, and same thing with the town halls when they give a marriage license. How do you enforce something like that? If somebody comes to you...
And what's legal to even ask?
Yeah, and so the enforcement is much more difficult because now you go back to the issue of a constitutional issue. You know, give me your passport and I'll give me your green card and I'll give you a marriage license.
Or are you likely to ask, are you marrying here of your own free will, or are you coming here with the second agenda, which is to bring in a tribe, a clan, or whatever illegally?
Assuming the person's here legally and the husband is marrying them for a bona fide marriage, a good reason, I don't know that it's the municipal court judges or the officiant's job to enforce immigration laws. I think it's the government's job to make sure that the person came here legally. Just like I don't think a Providence policeman is responsible for enforcing immigration, but if somebody commits a crime, then I do think that they have the authority to follow up on somebody's status and call the federal government in to enforce the immigration laws.
From what you can see, with the the proposed bills in every iteration that they have about changing this citizenship clause, do you see that if that ever were to happen, that suddenly it would put most of us in a place where we would have to suddenly be producing documents to prove that we were legal versus assuming that everyone who comes to the hospital is legal and needs to be treated? Do you see that there's going to be a problem with everyone suddenly having to produce a card, a thumbprint, a holograph that proves that I am here legally and am entitled to such services? Is that likely to happen?
Well,
No, I don't. No, it's like I go back to what I said
Right.
before, not during our lifetime. Somebody comes to a hospital, is pregnant, needs to have medical care, have that baby. I don't see a doctor or hospital saying, give me your green card or else I'm not going to allow you
right.
to
What are they going to do?
birth
Put
the
them on a
child here.
plane and say,
Yeah.
have,
Go back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
While you're
Or am I going to give you all of the services that I would someone else who is, I know, a
Right.
bona fide citizen?
So again, it goes back to fixing the problem before it happens.
Yeah.
And the other part of your question, as I understand the question, is if you're going to ask people who you suspect aren't here legally for documentation, then I do think it would have to be a law that everyone in the United States would have to carry something, because who's to say who you suspect? How do you make that determination?
Right, and that's and
It's
that
like
is the
selective enforcement.
Right,
almost.
yeah, and the 14th Amendment,
Yeah.
equal protection. If you're going to ask, and you get this a lot with speeding tickets, well, everyone was speeding. Well, you can't enforce everything, but if you're going to ask somebody a question, you should be able to ask everybody that question.
Right, and that was why I was asking that question, because if you referred to driving, how many times you've heard the driving while black or brown or green or pink or anything else, and suddenly if I've been stopped, I need to produce
Right.
evidence that I am here legally, and that certainly is opening up
Right.
a terrible can of worms.
Right. So, so the point is, again, enforce the immigration laws, and then you may not have to worry about the people who are here so much, because you've enforced it at the borders.
When it comes to the thought about immigration and the law that says you have to do this, 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 and this, there's also a portion that says you need to make sure that they are of good moral character. How does one monitor that when someone is applying for citizenship, unless you've been arrested for something?
Well, that's the big thing.
That's the only issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing in the law. And in Rhode Island, when a judge sentences somebody, they ask them, they tell them, this sentence could have immigration consequences. Are you aware of that? If you're not, before they'll take the plea, they make sure they're aware of it.
Sounds good. One other question is related to immigration. What does it mean, and what's the distinction about being a permanent resident versus being an actual citizen? If you're a permanent resident,
Yeah, and
you can do that in lots of different ways, I
This is
understand.
a little personal pet peeve of mine. There are some people who think that everybody who is here as an immigrant is illegal. People can legally come to the United States still, and they can have their documentation that say they're a permanent resident. It means they haven't been naturalized, so they're not a U.S. citizen, but they have the legal right to be here.
Forever permanent resident?
Permanent resident.
Interesting. Is that an easier status to get?
It's a step in the status to naturalization.
It'll be interesting to watch this. I guess there will be more case law of that coming up. So I hope that this has helped many of you in terms of your own position on the 14th Amendment, regardless of your political stance. And if you are interested in more information on how citizenship works, there's an opportunity for you to visit the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services website at www.uscis.gov. We thank you for tuning in to Legal Matters, and our discussion about legal matters will continue. And I'm not sure what our next topic is going to be, so I guess you'll all have to
What do
stay
you want to
tuned.
talk about next?
What should we talk
Surprise,
about?
surprise.
Surprise, surprise.
All right.
Maybe something to do with children. Maybe
Okay.
that might be a good topic. It seems like we've had a lot of feedback about that. Please stay tuned, because our discussions of legal matters will continue.